Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality podcast, is brought to you by eMenu Choice Point of Sale and Clark Pro. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast: educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Joining me today on Tips from Trestle is Shawn McGregor. Shawn is the Division Executive Chef at Healthcare Services Group. With his extensive experience in the culinary arts, Shawn leads the culinary training and collaborates with HSG leadership on the operational aspects in all areas of the culinary experience for their customers. Shawn, thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Thanks for having me.
So, Shawn, we just a couple weeks back spent some time in Orlando with the Florida Senior Living Association, and where we first met was at one of their conferences. And you kind of are one of the spearhead, one of the leaders of their annual culinary competition. And I'm so glad you made some time. I know you're super busy, bouncing all over the country with HSG. And so, but I want to talk about the culinary competition because I think what it is and what it represents is so important for the senior living industry. And so I'd love to just kind of have you tell us a little bit, like, how did the competition start? Like, what was the backstory for getting that all up and running?
So it's interesting. It's actually not as dramatic as one way healthcare services been part of before senior living for a very long time. And I had been involved a little bit, but not very often. And somewhere around 2018 or 2019, pre-COVID, I met with Gail at one of their pre-site visits. And she just said, is there something we could do to get people's attention? And I said, listen, chef's competitions get people's attention.
Yeah.
And that is what its intent was initially, just to get attention, just to get people involved. And I think it's funny that I think in that particular year, and sometimes we see this, but the highlight of that year was dining for some reason. And I know you get that. Every year they highlight something, either nursing, seating, something, and that particular happened to be dining. So yeah, I think our point of error wherever we were, and we just decided, let's just do this. And yeah, it was mostly me. I put most of it, but I've done chef competitions for years and getting ready to do some more actually.
I definitely see, Florida Senior Living was kind of the first place I'd seen where a state association, a big one, had taken something like this on and had done it. But I think a lot of people are catching on to not only the awareness that it can bring, but that it's just a fun, cool experience for people who maybe aren't foodies to participate in. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how the format works and how it's evolved over the past few years of doing this, because I think it's a little bit different than maybe what somebody might expect by watching, the Food Network and seeing some of those competitions.
Sure. So the decisions are certainly not made on skill level, because some of these, especially senior living, some of our upscale facilities have some amazing talent.
Yeah.
Having said that, there are a few time constraints, there are space constraints, the constraints are, listen, they're probably more minimal than I'm about to suggest. But more importantly than anything else in this competition, what we want is, one, we want to show off their chefs. We want them to showcase their facilities' abilities in dining, and we want chefs to have fun. I want them to enjoy it. And listen, chefs in general, as you know, are very competitive. So you don't want it to be over competitive. So the format is really pretty simple. What we generally do is we pick a plate generally me, food of sort that I think will, for senior living this year was, I literally just called it Mediterranean chicken. So the protein is the same for everybody. I know you've heard me say this before. Listen, whoever serves lobster wings. So if
Yeah.
you let somebody, do their steak lobster, and
Yeah.
tomahawk fried rib, and you allow them to do that, that's going to be your winner. I don't want that. So I usually pick a plate, and part of that is to be able to generate ingredient lists, generate pantry, so that we don't have, we just don't have the ability to throw out every single item they could possibly need. So if I generate a basic recipe, and then I can, just from basic experience, kind of add what I think a good chef, or what I think, or what I know that some of the skilled nursing or senior living or ALFs or aisles would do to that plate, I can add those ingredients and have them. So, and actually, I think people would be astonished at what 6 different chefs would come up with from the phrase Mediterranean chicken. And again, you got to see it here. It was dramatic.
It was, yeah. Being fortunate enough to be one of the judges this past year, like just seeing like the one of the chefs made fresh pasta, the other some of them were doing fingerling potatoes, some of them decided to do, I think it was a rice or some other types of starch. I mean, the dishes were, none of them were even close to similar, which I think is kind of part of the beauty of it. It's like we're showcasing these chefs and their ability to take what some might think, oh, Mediterranean chicken is a recipe, but really it's more of just kind of an idea, and build from that. I think it was such a,
That's a very good way to put it, Aaron. It's an idea. It's a sort of a dish concept, if you will. I mean, absolutely.
so
And I think that fares well. I think that fares well, especially in this particular event. And again, I'm the one person who does know what equipment they have, who knows what they have to work with. And so if I pick the dish, I know I can kind of picture where they may or may not go and give them the opportunity to do it with, being that person.
yeah. And one of the things I'm curious about is, do they send you their recipes ahead of time, or do you just say, here's the list of pantry items that we've put together for you? Kind of talk a little bit about how those dishes come together on the chef side.
So I do not ask them for a recipe. Now I know that for She Living does, part of their award or reward from that is that the property, whoever it is, wherever we're doing the event, may or may not serve their dish the next day. It's sort of part of the competition. I don't require that. But one of the things we do to kind of maybe help your question a little bit is this. I don't necessarily need a recipe, but I write the pantry, and then I give them the ability to bring another ingredient or two, special ingredient, and they do have to tell me what that is.
Got it.
So I can see where it's going. So if I don't have, I'm pretty sure I did in this particular event. I want to say, I think it was artichoke hearts, which I did not provide. Put capers at Colorado, where I know they're going to go there.
Yeah.
Somebody wanted artichoke hearts, and I thought, wow, okay, I see where this is headed. So yeah, and again, the stuff that fresh pasta, and to that point, also a piece of equipment. So the guy who made fresh pasta on his own roll. So we give them the opportunity to do that, and that they do have to tell me ahead of time. So one, I could make it work for them, if they need power, whatever that is, and it does give me an idea of where they're headed.
And I'm thinking about how the stereotypes around senior living food is, right? Like, we've been in this industry for a very long time, and we know like where it was and where we're at today. But I think still the population in general is learning that the ability to see chefs do that, bring their own ingredients, bring a piece of equipment where they can make fresh pasta, or they want to do something with the artichoke heart, like you said. How does doing that as a part of this competition really help us as an industry change that idea of what senior living food is and can be and should be?
That's a good question. Aside from the collaboration of those 6 chefs who communicate one another, and they get to see what the other person does, and they get to learn from it. And by the way, so do I, as being a divisional guy. I get to take a lot of that back with me, and I have 1,400 kitchens. So in that context, that's a great point. Listen, I would submit that not just, I know certainly my company, I have some unbelievable talent, And there are some assisted living facilities and some ILs that, and most people will not believe I'm about to say this. I know at least one Michelin star chef who works in an IL. And some of it is to, they bring that talent from there. So the other thing the chef's competition does in that regard to your question, and I did kind of veer off there. I think that Four Seasons was the starter of this process. I think you're going to see this grow a lot. And again, mostly for that reason, to get this back to the buildings, back to every single resident's plate, which is where you want it to be.
I'm glad you pointed out the camaraderie of the competition because, I mean, everybody who was there, who was, watching and participating and kind of, and the spectators, you knew who was with who, right? And
Yeah.
it got a little boisterous and rowdy there as we were kind of wrapping up the judging and awarding things, just because they're wanting to support their team. And I think all of the chefs, even the ones that, maybe didn't come out on top, I think there is this kind of heightened, like, hey, we're here. We did this really cool, great thing. And now I'm going to take this inspiration from this competition back and share it, not just with the people in my community, but with my sister communities as well. Cause none of those chefs in that competition were standalone operators. They were all part of
Right.
groups. And so it's great publicity for those operator groups as well to say, hey, my chef was a part of this. And now you can see how amazing all of this was and how these chefs competed at such a high level.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So to kind of go back to the start, so talk logistics a little bit, right? You can't have 40 chefs participate. That's just the numbers are important. So kind of walk through some of the nuts and bolts about how the competition is done. So that way our listeners can know, hey, I'm interested in maybe doing something like this, or I want to be a part of something like this. What can I expect?
Technology continues to drive changes in senior care, and that includes food service. eMenu Choice is an award-winning point-of-service application for managing the dining function in senior living communities. This mobile, touchscreen-enabled software enhances the dining experience for residents while streamlining processes for staff. The flexibility and functionality of eMenu Choice makes it an effective solution for any type of senior living environment, from independent and assisted living to skilled nursing facilities. It works for production kitchens or restaurant-style service with options for per meal or a la carte pricing, and accommodates a variety of payments, including bill to account, meal credits, and credit cards. Created by a senior care provider with more than a century of experience serving older adults, eMenu Choice eliminates communication barriers between staff and residents while enabling person-centered choices and greater resident satisfaction. eMenu Choice, transforming dining for senior living.
So in these particular events, and anything probably in this size event, our cutoff is six. Six chefs. It's a good number. It's almost it's too shy of the poker table, if you will. It's a good number to kind of keep it moving. It's easy to get lost in it, and it's easy for it because it takes so much time. You brought this up earlier. When you're watching a cook's competition on television, it's an hour and a half long, but you only see 20 minutes of it. And so all of the in-between time, it's kind of boring to everybody else. So you got to kind of find a way to manage that, which obviously you and I do. That's sort of part of our premise to keep that motivation going. So let me give you as much technically as I can. So it's a 6-foot table. It's got two, what we refer to in the business as cassette burners. Some of them have cages where they've got a nice cage on it. Some of them you do. They got a cutting board. They have all the utensils they need, several pots and pans. We set up a single communal station. So just for boiling water and those kind of things to keep them, so I'm not taking up a burner just to boil water if they're going to make pasta or whatever they're going to do. The pantry is set up based on the dish, and some of the the majority of the properties, and at some point people see pictures, they do a really nice job doing that. They put the food out nice, it's displayed, it's really pretty, and then we ask them to give us maybe a dozen options for plating so that the chefs get to choose which plates they are. The way we do that logistically, primarily, as I put 6 numbers in a hat. Each one of them pulls it. Number one is number one. That's the end of the conversation. He gets the pantry first. He gets first choice at plating, whatever plates he has. The stations, although they're all equal. And again, it's usually on a showroom floor. So it's kind of right in front of everybody. Some places do it during a meal. Some places do it on a trade show floor, depending on how they wish to do that. All that's kind of inconsequential. The rules are pretty simple. I actually asked the judges in this particular competition, which you don't normally see. We have organization and adaptation skills and all those things on the sheet. So they'll kind of walk around why they're cooking and get a feel for that. Because again, in the world we live in, it's important, right? We're feeding a community that needs to be taken care of. So that's the gist. I hope I answered that. I know it's kind of everywhere, but
No, and I just
it's logistically, it's really simple. And actually, I'm actually getting ready to do a couple myself among my community. And honestly, I'm kind of hoping that maybe they'll do that too. I mean, I would love to see the winner, maybe to your point, none of them are standalone. Maybe he goes back and does the same thing for his community. He gathers up all his chefs and then they're all there to support him. Listen, again, we all know this. Food is the most important thing. Listen, I'm retired from submarine force, and I think it makes this sort of kind of a natural place for me. And I've been in contract management in every venue known to mankind, but I live in healthcare and I live in this world, not because I have to, because I want to. I can work anywhere. But coming from a submarine force, my philosophy of that and this is very similar, and it's pretty simple. There's no McDonald's. You don't stop submarine in the middle of the ocean and let them go to 7-Eleven. Just don't do it. So what you feed them is what they get. And you have to want to do it. And listen, submarine for it. You're a really good cooker. They'll shoot you up torpedo tube. So what we do is similar, right? But they can order out. They can do all those things, but why should they have to? And that's my take on that whole thing. And I hope that the chefs that come to the competition bring that back to their worlds. That's the goal. That's the real goal.
Yeah, I think you hit that nail on the head of these chefs could be anywhere. They could be at hotels or restaurants and doing this, but they're doing it for a whole different kind of purpose and with a whole different kind of passion around the customer who they're serving. And I think that definitely plays into some of the competition and why they do what they do, I think, in these settings. So as we kind of wrap up here, some of our listeners are chefs and cooks. They're in the kitchen. They're listening to this and they're thinking, man, that sounds like something I'd like to be a part of, or I want to do something like that. What would you tell those chefs or those kitchen people what they could do to get ready to participate in this kind of competition?
So it's funny you ask that because anybody who is a chef who has ever been in any sort of competition already knows the answer to that question. And it is practice. So, and the one thing that if you ever hear those guys who made it through or she's, they'll tell you they run practice that 100 times. The truth is you'll do that as a chef anyway. Listen, there are recipes and some chefs or line cooks are recipe followers and that's okay. But when you're a creative chef, what you do is you do it over and over and over and over until it gets, no kidding, right where you want it to be. And to your question, I have been in many competitions, as one would think, competition certainly builds character. But I think that the one thing I would say about competitions and everyone should get to everyone that they possibly can is you can't be a chef, go to any sort of competition with other chefs and not leave with something.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible. I don't care how long you've been doing it, what you've been doing, almost impossible to leave that competition or leave that space without knowing something new today.
I completely agree. I think that is super great advice. So if anyone of the listeners want to learn more about what you guys do at Healthcare Services Group, how can they connect with you or the company and learn more?
The website's probably the easiest place to do it, healthcareservicesgroup.com. Certainly they can reach out to me. Can I give you an email address and have it in there?
I'll drop it in the show notes.
My email is literally my name, Shawn McGregor at HCSG Corp, HCSGcorp.com. And anybody can reach out to me anytime they want. And listen, even outside of the company, I have me and many others who are more than happy to mentor anybody who wants to grow in this business. And by the way, anybody who wants to mentor, reach out to me too. We need more mentors. We need people involved in this business. And certainly in the healthcare space. But I submit to you that, again, having worked everywhere, I won't work anywhere else. And if I may take just a minute, I think I told you this story once. Let me read it real quick.
Yeah.
When I first started in healthcare, I was in a building. I'll tell the Reader's Digest version, but I was in a building. We had set up. It was Christmas Eve, and we had set up a big buffet, a big Christmas tree behind it. It was stunning, beautiful. Food looked really good. Everything looked great. I was standing in my chef's jacket, which we don't, chef never to dining room facilities, which is another problem. We'll talk about that later. But I was standing there. The very first person they brought in came up, and I was standing right at the buffet, and she reached out, she grabbed my hand, and she said, "Did you do this just for me?" And I said, "Why would I do that?" And she said, "Well, I'm 100 today." And I said, "Absolutely. Happy birthday." It was their Christmas party. It was good to see, but it was their 100th birthday. And honestly, Aaron, I can tell you 100 of those stories. And it's why I live in this space.
Yeah. I think that's why most of us do this in this part of the industry. Food is our passion, but we've learned that is also just as important, if not more so.
Absolutely.
Well, Shawn, thank you so much for coming on, sharing all of your background with the competition and your great stories about why being in this industry is so important. So thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you, sir, for having me.
So there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestle. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.